Come
And
on.
so I remember working there and hearing so much, oh, so and so blocked my transfer.
Yes.
It's a thing and
Yes.
it's toxic. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Dream It Forward podcast. My name is Shalon Johnson,
And I'm Kalyn Wilson.
and we are very excited to talk to you all today again. Today, we're going to be talking about job architecture and
Mhm.
what the implications of job architecture are on your organization. So let's get into it. But first, before I get into that, I want to see, have you all subscribed yet?
We'll give y'all a couple seconds to do it.
Job architecture can sometimes be referred to as the job structure or the job leveling, and that refers to the infrastructure or hierarchy of the jobs within an organization. Job architecture can include a few different things, such as your titles. So that can be your HR business partners, for example, your benefits administrators, your recruiters, your engineers, your accountants, whatever. But it can also include your levels. So are you an entry level employee? Are you a mid level manager, a mid level employee, senior level, or executive?
Mhm.
And then also you go up to the C suite, which is often included in in the executive levels. Then we want to talk about, are you an individual contributor or are you a people manager? Individual contributors usually don't have anybody that they manage under them. They usually just work on project based things and contribute to the organization in that way. But people managers have a team that they manage, and those employees on the team, they report up to that manager for and include other things like performance management and those other additional duties. Then we have our career growth paths. What is it that you need to do to get to the next level in your role or in your job? So that could mean, how do I grow within my role,
Mhm.
or how do I get to the next level within my organization? So, Kaylin, we know that an organization's job architecture impacts the way it operates. But do you think it's important to an organization's success?
Yes, very much. So if we think about the four parts of job architecture, so we have titling, leveling, tracks, which is IC, individual contributor or people manager, and then the
Mhm.
fourth area, which is career growth paths. If people do not have clarity on what they should be accomplishing in the organization and where they fit in the overall infrastructure of the company, they cannot be successful in their work and the company itself can be successful. So when I think about my most favorite jobs that I've worked, they were ones where my title was very clear, my level was very clear, the pathway to growth was very clear, and it was clear whether or not I was responsible for other people or if I should be focusing on my own work.
Right.
Those blurred lines create all kinds of chaos.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. I like structure as well.
Mhm.
And I'm also a person that likes to grow a lot within my role, as Kaylin is. And
Mm.
so when we go into a new role, we like to be able to determine, how could I make this role better? What it is
Yep.
that I need to do exactly? How do I move things forward, whether that's projects or teams? And how could I get to the next level? Because, the next level usually comes with money.
Right.
And so if you are interested in that type of track, you want to outline that when you first get into a role.
You know what? I have a point to make about that though, because the idea of growing within your role,
Hmm.
right? So there are many ways that you can recognize and reward employees for great performance. And there are also many ways that you can sabotage someone's performance.
Yeah.
And that could include moving them up too slow or too quick. It could also include, we talked about in the last episode, span of control, giving them too many direct reports or too few team members to be effective at the work. It could be making everybody a people manager as a way of rewarding them versus creating opportunities for someone to be a high level and high titled individual contributor. So I had one job that I worked. This was probably the only company that did this. You could be an IC and their levels were numbered. So it was L1 through, I think, 8 was the highest. It might have been 10. But you could be a high level and high titled individual contributor. So you could be an L8 IC and you could be a people manager level 5, and technically your influence in the company could be similar depending on what department you were in, but you didn't have the added pressure of managing people when that wasn't your interest, it wasn't your skill set, and it wasn't your zone of excellence. And we're going to say that a
Yeah.
lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
When you only when managing people is your only way of recognizing and rewarding top performers, you are engineering high attrition,
Mm-hmm.
because at that point you are possibly not preparing people in ways that are meaningful to them to be managers, because it's a cookie cutter thing. Again, everybody who performs well becomes this. So there isn't a lot of room for individualization with that. And that's scary because not everybody wants to be or is good at being a people manager. I'll be
No,
honest, I
absolutely
really
not.
don't want to be one.
No,
I don't. That's not my interest.
no.
It feels scary to me. But I like doing things like managing project teams, things like
Yeah.
that. But the idea of being the person to sign checks or to even like corrective action, I
Yeah.
just don't like it. It's not interesting to me. And
You know
so,
what it is though? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you good. Go ahead. I
Yeah.
could have went on
It
and on about that one.
I think as a people manager, um, you're really responsible for that person's success in their
Mm,
role. And
come on.
so when I am in a people management role, that's how I look at things. That's how you're
Hmm.
supposed to look at it. You're supposed
Hmm.
to be evaluating that person's performance management and making sure that you are growing them in their roles.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, everybody doesn't do that. But if you're not going to do that, and if that's not your interest, you should not be a people manager.
Sure.
I'm very curious to know people managers who don't believe in performance management or who don't take it as serious as they should take it.
Mm.
Why are they people managers?
Because a lot of times that's the only way that they could go to the next level. And that's why Shalana and I are talking about those career growth paths. Because, and this happens a lot in highly structured environments, not as much in companies that are maybe either flatter or have more of an organic structure. We didn't talk about that last time. So let me make a quick note about that. So there's a difference between a mechanistic and an organic structure in a company. Mechanistic is where there are pretty singular and linear chains of command, and where it's like this person only talks to this person above, only talks to this person. It's not a lot of lateral communication. It's not always a lot of cross-functional work being performed. Organic structures are more similar to pods. And so you'll have like maybe a project team of 5 or 6 people, but they could also work together with this other pod, and people may be fluid in terms of the pods in which they work. So I bring that up because when you think about career growth paths, have you set up your career growth paths to where it's mechanistic to where somebody can only move up on their ladder? Or have you set up more of a career lattice where someone could work on cross-functional projects but still stay within their group that they really love? Do people have the opportunity to make a lateral move that's more fulfilling and completely change functions or departments? Do
Mhm.
people have the opportunity to move up and over? Do people have the opportunity sometimes to move down and over? Because sometimes somebody might say, look, I'm the director of marketing right now, but I would love to be an entry level engineer because I'm just really
Right.
passionate about that work. So, where have you created that freedom in the organization that people can make the moves that are most meaningful for their skills, their motivation, and their career futures?
Yeah.
That's extremely important.
Yeah. I think the great point to highlight there is within an organization, within their organization, how can they do that? Because
Mm,
a lot of people who are switching careers, which is what you kind of talked about with that moving down and over, that's where we see that a lot in, let's say, like tech right now. A
mm-hmm.
lot of people are transitioning to the tech field, but they have to enter into these entry level positions.
Right.
Some people are not taking the opportunity within their own organizations to say, "Hey, I want to transition to the tech department. How do I get in?" Because that could be frowned upon within your organization, and you might not want to burn those ties. So instead, people are transitioning out, leaving their organizations in order to enter these entry level roles.
Let's talk about it. Because even my chair had to squeak a noise to that one because I have seen, I've experienced the curiosity of someone who's like, oh, I really like this department. And if those two leaders have a beef, they will find a way to suppress someone's career growth so that they don't lose their talent. There was just an article on LinkedIn
Yeah.
where a woman, the article overall was talking about Black men being allies to Black women in the workplace. I'm not going there on this episode, but it was fascinating. I'm gonna try to find that and link that in the comments. Um, but in any case, the point that the person was making was that because of the way the company structured their job architecture, this one person pretty much had all the control over that person's career growth path, their titling, and their leveling.
But where do
And
we see
because
that
of
at?
that, it was,
In the city?
yeah,
Sometimes where you work in these government jobs and you're
let's,
trying to switch departments or, switch titling and stuff like that. These
yes,
executive directors or sometimes higher, they have so much control over you actually moving to that next department or agency because the approval has to go through them.
come
And
on.
so I remember working there and hearing so much, oh, so and so blocked my transfer.
Yes,
It's a thing and
yes.
it's toxic.
Let okay, cause see, let me calm down because I gotta bring it up because this is why leveling is so important, and where it's important to not have people doing tasks that are out of their level
Yeah.
in order to prove their worth. Because I'll give you an example. When we talked about this last month, I tend to be more of a strategic vision based thinker. And a lot of my managers were operational folks who, again, the only way to move to reward them was to make them a people manager, but they really were not cut out for the level of leadership at
Mhm.
which they were required to perform. So they would use my skill set to do their work, not reward or credit me, and then block me from moving around because that was their only way to be a strategic
Yeah.
thinker.
You got to do their work. So why
You
would I allow you to move?
Yes. And so I was kept at being a lower level IC several times on purpose, just so that they could pick my brain whenever they wanted or needed to. And then when it was the opportunity for me to grow my path and move to either different pods or projects, they would actually lie because, again, the work that I'm doing for them is not anywhere in my job description. That's not my role. It's literally their role. So they're not going to tell anybody I'm doing their work. So it was
Yeah.
very easy for them to lie about my performance and say, oh, well, she didn't finish this. And I'm like, yeah, but you pulled me off of that, or you distracted me from doing that so that I could help you. That is my puppy, everybody. I'm so sorry. He's getting frustrated. So these are all the things that happen when you don't have appropriate job architecture.
Mhm.
Because if at the point that they saw that I had a talent, for example, for strategy development, or a talent for data analysis, or any other skill that wasn't in my initial job title, they could have retitled me or
Yeah.
even sought to re-level me so that I could have been appropriately recognized and rewarded for my contributions rather than stifling my growth path. That became an attrition issue because I got the heck up out of there as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
A lot of people don't want to do that because they have to
Mhm.
renegotiate the contract between you
Yes.
and them. And so if they don't have the budget to incorporate these new tasks and
Mhm.
responsibilities,
Mhm.
they're going to just make excuses. So the messed up part about it is that you're going to do the work anyway,
Yep.
because they're going to find a way to hold you accountable to that work. And
Mhm.
that's exactly why you can't rely on an organization's career growth pathway for you. You have
No.
to go in there and be strategic and have your own career growth pathway. So, what
Mhm.
you do is you go in there into an organization, you figure out what their resources are for employees for career growth. And that could be a learning development department if they
Mhm.
have one, an academy if they have one, whatever they have. Use that to your full ability and figure out how you are going to get out of there. What are you going to get out of them?
Yep.
How many years are you going to be there? And what is your exit strategy? Don't
You
wait
know
for
who
them
that
to do it
happens a
for you.
lot to?
Who?
Executive assistants.
Yes.
This is a huge DEI issue because executive assistants tend to be women or in the LGBTQ plus community. And so I've seen it so many times where they are constantly passed over
Yeah.
for opportunities for cross-functional projects because the leader is like, yeah, but who's going to manage my calendar?
Exactly.
And it's like, fam, this person has like 2 degrees, like 20 years of experience. Like, come on, that's not all that they want to do, right? And so I've seen at a couple of companies where EAs have gotten together almost like an informal union
Mm.
to advocate for themselves and say, hey, y'all, we need to be able to move up. We need
Yeah.
to be able to have a plan for this. I want to work on such and such project. I need time for this. I need you all to pay for professional development, etc. And I'm not mad at it because you shouldn't take advantage of what you perceive to be
Mm-hmm.
a disadvantage on their end that they won't have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's unfair. And those are some very important people that you don't
Yes.
want to make mad.
Yes.
That's not the group you want to
Yeah.
feel marginalized.
No.
So there are ways that you can build up everyone's pathway.
Mm.
Everybody should have a path, including your executive level staff. So there was one client, we were working on org design. And I told them straight up, I said, hey, you are responsible for these people's development. Like while
Mhm.
you're creating these development paths for this whole company, you're also responsible for your direct reports. And even if they came to you with all the experience in the world, and that's why you picked them to be in the C-suite and they're super dope, they still have a pathway.
Yeah.
And the pathway isn't always out, right? So while they're there, how can you support their growth and development? What are the things that they need help with? Because I feel like when you get to the executive level, the stakes are higher for failure. So
Mm.
you're literally on a cliff at all times.
Right.
One bad quarter, or one bad year, or one fatal mistake, or one error on social media, anything could be the thing that makes you in a chopping block.
Right.
And while some of us will say, like, well, yeah, that makes sense because you're really high up, that's also unfair because just as much as you're on a cliff for being let go, you should be on a cliff for development too. And you
Absolutely.
deserve that no matter what your job title or what your level is.
Absolutely. He said a lot.
Yeah.
He said a
Yeah.
lot. I
I
want
think one oh,
to.
go ahead.
No, I want to go back to the executive assistants for a little bit
Mhm,
because I have seen that with my own two
mhm,
eyes a few years ago. They are, in some cases, because I've seen both sides of this,
mhm.
in some cases, they are the most disrespected title in a
Yes.
department,
Yes.
although they know everything. Everybody
Everything.
the executive assistant, even if it's not your executive assistant,
Come on.
everybody goes to that person. And so I have definitely seen instances where whoever that person is that they're assisting are super disrespectful to them. I've been in a department one time where this one person kept losing assistants. Like
Mm,
every 2 months, they will lose an assistant.
wow.
And I'm just sitting back like, nobody don't notice what's going on. That person
Yeah,
was never
yeah.
talked to. That person was never reprimanded. Nothing. Literally, the blame was always on the assistant.
A problem.
And that's messed up because everybody knew this person had a nasty attitude.
Yeah.
So I want to make that point to say, not only you as whatever title you're in, even if it's an executive assistant or whatever, not only you have to make sure you are taking full control of your career growth and know what
Mhm.
that strategy is, you have to always be mindful of these things that happen.
Yep.
See these behaviors earlier on and expedite that exit strategy because it
Yeah.
could become such a toxic environment. And depending on where you work, you don't want to get on that person's bad side where they are blocking you from moving around within
Yep.
that organization.
Another part to that too, because we're talking about creating sticky jobs or jobs that people want to stay
Hmm.
in. Titles matter a lot too. So I kind of remember early, and you probably remember this too, like when it transitioned from calling people a secretary to an executive assistant,
Yeah.
right? And that was like just like commonplace. That's only been in the last, I want to say maybe 10 to 15 years
Yeah.
in many industries. And even that's important because
Yeah.
I'm not quote unquote just a secretary. I am the assistant of an executive, or I'm an administrative assistant. It's important for people's titles to add weight and gravity to what they contribute to the company.
Yeah.
That can be an inspiration for people to stick around. And I also want to make this distinction. So titles are typically outward facing influences. So when somebody outside of the company reads a job title, they're like, okay, that's a signal as far as what they contribute. But
Mhm.
the levels are more of an inward facing influence. So
Yeah.
the difference between who an L2 and an L7 can speak to, the rooms they sit in, the systems they have access to, the events they can attend, the amount that they can purchase for the company, whether or not they get a company card, right? It signals all of these things internally. And so it's important that you have the right number of levels and that the levels are consistent across the company in terms of expectations and access.
Mhm.
Because if an L6 in engineering has the same amount of influence as what it would take someone to get to an L9 in HR, that's not fair, right? Or if an L3 in finance carries more weight in the company than an L7 in marketing, is something wrong there.
Mhm.
So each department is different because we talked before about departmentation, but those levels should be where you gain some consistency across the company.
Yeah. And I do want to point out that in every organization, they may not use that terminology and say levels. It
Mm-hmm.
might be codes or some other
Mm-hmm.
things that I've seen in the past. It varies a bit. But a lot of times that's also tied to your salary. And
Yes.
so while that information might not be externally faced, internally you will be able to see what salary is tied to the specific level.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be able to make your decision on where you want to move within the organization based off of that salary wise, or if
Mm-hmm.
you need to make your way out.
Love it. Well, that, yeah, you got me thinking about a lot of things. Final parting question for our listeners. What part of job architecture has been your greatest pain point in your career? And which part of job architecture has been the source of your greatest joy? So remember, the four parts are titling, leveling, career growth paths, and tracks, meaning individual contributor or people manager. So tell us in the comments what's been your greatest pain point and what's been your greatest source of joy. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Looking forward to seeing your thoughts, and we will catch you next Wednesday on the Dreaming Forward podcast. See y'all.
Bye.